I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to suspect my own wife of cheating. But looking back, I should have seen the signs sooner. Stephanie and I had been married for 6 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. We had our routines, Sunday morning coffee runs, movie nights on Fridays, lazy afternoons in the backyard. She was my person. Or at least I thought she was. Then, things started to change. It wasn't overnight. It was slow, subtle. At first, it was small things, texting more often, keeping her phone closer. Then she started working late a lot. Too much. The excuses piled up. Meetings, deadlines, last-minute projects. I told myself I was overthinking it. That's what love does, right? It makes you doubt your own instincts. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and found her in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark, phone in hand. She was smiling, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in a long time. A soft, secretive smile. I stood there in the hallway, watching her, my stomach twisting. The next morning, I casually asked, "Who were you talking to last night?" She barely looked up from her coffee. "Oh, just a coworker. Late-night work stuff." That was the first real lie. I didn't say anything then, but I started paying closer attention. And once you start looking for the cracks, you can't unsee them. She changed her phone password. She started leaving the room to take calls. She'd laugh at something on her screen and, when I asked what was funny, she'd just shake her head. Just a dumb meme. The distance grew. One Friday night, she told me she had a work dinner. "It's last minute," she said, grabbing her coat. I watched her leave, my gut screaming at me. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked our phone bill. One number stood out, late-night calls, long conversations. Over and over again. I searched the number, and when the name popped up, my blood ran cold. Jason, my best friend. I stared at the name on my screen, my stomach twisting into knots. Jason, the guy I had trusted for years. The guy who had stood beside me on my wedding day, raising a toast to my beautiful future with Stephanie. The pieces started falling into place. His weird, guilty expression whenever he saw me. The way he had been too busy to hang out lately. The subtle shift in how Stephanie spoke about him. I needed undeniable proof. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I acted normal. I kissed her goodnight. I told her I loved her. And while she slept peacefully beside me, I made a plan. The next day, I set up a simple test. I told her I had to work late. Then I waited. Stephanie didn't hesitate to make plans of her own. By 7:30, she was heading to bed early. By 8:15, her car was gone. I followed her. She didn't go to a work event. She didn't go to a friend's house. She drove across town to a quiet street, pulled into a driveway, and walked right inside a house like she had been there 100 times before. Jason's house. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. I just watched. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, the porch light flicked on. The door opened, and there she was, Stephanie, stepping out, adjusting her coat, her hair slightly tousled. She looked happy, relaxed, the kind of happy she hadn't been around me in months. Jason stood in the doorway, watching her leave with a look I recognized instantly, because it was the way I used to look at her. I waited until she was back home before I walked through the door, forcing a smile. "Hey, how was your night?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Fine. Just a quiet night." She didn't even flinch when she lied to me, and that's when I knew. Confronting her now would be too easy. She would deny it, spin it, twist the truth. No, I needed to make her feel what I felt. I needed her to know that I knew. So I planned something unforgettable. I knew I couldn't just confront her in the heat of the moment. If I did, she'd deny it, deflect, maybe even turn it around on me. No, I needed something undeniable. Something she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of. So I started gathering proof. Over the next few days, I kept my cool. I kissed her goodbye in the morning, acted normal at dinner, and even laughed at her small talk. But behind the scenes, I was paying attention. Her phone was always face down. Whenever she got a message, she would tilt the screen away. One night, when she went to shower, I took a deep breath and picked up her phone. It was locked, of course, but I knew her well. I typed in the passcode I thought she'd never use. My birthday. The screen unlocked. At that moment I felt sick. Some part of me had still been holding on to hope. Hope that maybe I was wrong, that maybe I had misread everything. But as soon as I opened her messages, I knew. There it was. The truth. The texts were all there. Long conversations, inside jokes, late night, I miss you messages. Plans to meet. Conversations where they talked about me like I was just an obstacle in their way. I scrolled further. Photos. Nothing too explicit, but enough to confirm everything. A picture of them together, one I had never seen before. A shot of her at a restaurant on a night she told me she was working late. It was real. My hands were shaking, but I stayed calm. I took screenshots, saved them to a flash drive, and put her phone back exactly how it was. That night, as we lay in bed, she sighed and turned to me. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I smiled, looking at the woman who had been lying to me for months. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I love you." I looked into her eyes and, for the first time in years, felt absolutely nothing. I had everything I needed. Now it was time to set my plan in motion. I had the proof. I had the truth. Now I just needed the perfect way to reveal it. I could have confronted her right away, but I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to experience the moment where everything came crashing down, the way it had for me. Our wedding anniversary was coming up in a few days. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The night before, I told her I had something special planned, something intimate, just the two of us at home, no distractions. She smiled, completely unaware of what was coming. The next evening I set the stage. Dim lighting, candles, a carefully chosen playlist. And at the perfect moment, as she walked into the living room, our wedding song began to play. She looked surprised. "Wow, you really went all out." I smiled. "Of course. Tonight is important." She walked over, slipping her arms around me as we began to sway to the music. For a brief second, I wondered if she felt guilty at all, if she had any idea what was about to happen. Then, as we danced, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. I placed it on the table. She noticed immediately. Her body tensed. "What's this?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back, watching as she reached for it. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first photo, then the next. Screenshots of texts, call logs, locations. Every piece of evidence she could possibly need to understand exactly what this was. Her face drained of color. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Go ahead. Keep looking." She flipped through the papers, her breathing becoming uneven. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And then, finally, she lifted her head and met my gaze. She knew. I knew. And there was no way out. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't." My voice was steady, calm. "I don't want to hear it. I just want you to understand something. This is the last time you will ever lie to me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they meant nothing to me now. "I'll be filing for divorce," I said, stepping back. "You and Jason can figure out the rest." She collapsed onto the couch, staring at the papers in front of her. She didn't try to argue, didn't try to justify it, because she knew. She had finally been caught, and I was already gone. The moment hung between us, heavy and final. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just sat there, staring at the evidence spread across the table, as if seeing her own betrayal in print made it more real. I waited, giving her a chance to say something. A confession, an apology, anything. But all she could manage was a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you." I let out a slow breath. "But you did." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "No," my voice was firm. "You made your choices. Now you live with them. I grabbed my keys. I had already packed my essentials. The rest could wait. I wasn't going to stay in this house a second longer than I had to. As I walked toward the door, she finally spoke. Please, can we talk? I turned, looking at the woman I once thought I'd spend forever with. The woman I had built a life with, trusted completely, until she threw it all away. I shook my head. There's nothing left to talk about. And then I walked out. Leaving wasn't easy. Even after everything, there were moments when doubt tried to creep in. Had I done the right thing? Could we have fixed it? But then I remembered the texts, the lies, the way she smiled at her phone in the middle of the night, completely unaware that I was already watching everything fall apart. The divorce process started quickly. I had proof. There was no argument to be made, no drawn-out negotiations. I wasn't interested in revenge. I just wanted out. She tried reaching out. Texts, calls, even an email once, saying she regretted everything, that it had been a mistake, that she missed me. I never responded. I focused on rebuilding. I moved into my own place, one that wasn't filled with memories of her. I reconnected with friends, the real ones, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt like me again. As for Jason, I never saw him again. He didn't reach out, didn't try to explain. Maybe he knew there was no excuse that would ever be enough. Last I heard, they didn't even end up together. And honestly, that was never my concern, because I had moved on, and I was free.